After being struck by a car and suddenly forced into a life in a wheelchair, what my husband handed me was a completed divorce form. "It's your own fault you're in that wheelchair. I don't want to deal with caregiving. Let's get a divorce. I'm not gonna clean up your mess," he said coldly, plunging my world into darkness. After 40 years of supporting him, I couldn't accept this treatment. A flame of anger ignited within me. "My name is Evelyn. I had just turned 60. I've been married to Liam, who is 3 years older than me, for 40 years. We met during our community college days. Back then, I looked forward to having coffee at the small cafe where he worked. The cafe was run by his parents, and he, leveraging his appearance, worked there as a waiter. He listened empathetically to my complaints, which he probably found uninteresting, and I was drawn to how he could chat so friendly with every customer. After spending a year making my approach, it paid off, and we started dating. When I graduated from community college, we decided to get married. Though some friends said it was too soon, I wanted to give my elderly grandmother, who raised me in the absence of my parents, some peace of mind, so we went ahead and got married. As expected, my grandmother seemed reassured by our wedding but passed away before she could hold a great-grandchild, leaving my uncle in a distant city as my only blood relative. However, I wasn't lonely. Because my in-laws treated me just like their own daughter. Living with them in their home, just a 10-minute walk from the cafe, was not suffocating at all but truly comfortable, and I fully experienced the joy of family life. My in-laws taught me the cafe business, both strictly and kindly, and about a year after we got married, our adorable daughter Sophia was born, bringing me to the height of happiness. Shortly thereafter, my in-laws decided to retire. They probably wanted to hand over the cafe during the good times. It seems they decided to move to a second home they had bought at some point, and though I felt a bit lonely, I sent them off with a smile since it was their decision. Soon, the cafe officially became my husband Liam's responsibility, and I joined him in running it. Fortunately, I had been thoroughly trained by my in-laws in everything from the menu recipes to bookkeeping right after getting married, and Liam had likewise learned by their side, so the cafe continued to do well with our regular customers sticking by us. However, as the national economy improved and my in-laws were no longer around to keep an eye on things, Liam started to slack off at work. "I'm gonna head out for a bit." "Hey, it's almost lunchtime. Can't you see I'm swamped here?" I'd respond, showing him our daughter sleeping in the baby carrier as he hurried to leave the cafe. Liam had insisted we not leave our daughter until she was over 3, so I worked at the cafe with our young daughter strapped to my back. "If you're not here and she gets upset or needs a diaper change, and I have to step away, then there will be no one to look after the customers. It's a problem." "It's fine. It's mostly regulars who come anyway. Besides, making them wait a bit or cutting corners won't hurt our prices." "No." I was at a loss for words at his carelessness, which seemed out of place for someone in the food service industry, but what he said wasn't entirely wrong. At that time, we were experiencing a rare economic boom, and our cafe, like others, had plenty of customers who spent generously. Our menu items ranged from $20. A minor slip-up here and there, and our regulars, who make up the bulk of our clientele, would forgive us. Newcomers would probably let it slide at these prices too, my husband thought. The leniency was such that there were customers who would tip me, seeing how hard I was working while juggling child-rearing. Unlike today, the online information wasn't widespread, so word of mouth, for better or worse, didn't spread so easily. In fact, there were plenty of cafes offering lower quality than ours that still managed to stay afloat. However, I truly wanted our customers to leave feeling that was delicious, and I felt so relaxed, and I didn't want to tarnish the reputation of the cafe handed down by my in-laws. Customers, tables, meals, coffee, and even my daughter. I was managing everything attentively, working through my tasks. The small size of the cafe, with no real peak times, meant I could run it on my own, and thanks to the economy, we were making a decent profit. But that was the issue. "Honey, we have an order." 2 new customers ordered sandwiches with coffee. "I'm busy right now. You take care of it. That horse I bet on hit big. I was dumbfounded as my husband casually dismissed me and continued his conversation with a regular across the counter. Originally, my husband was in charge of the kitchen and I took care of the front of the house, but as he thought I could manage, he increasingly began to slack off. After finishing the prep work and opening preparations, he would chat with regulars or read the racing paper, merely observing me work as if it were someone else's business. If I complained, he'd retort with a nonchalant face, "You're managing fine on your own, I don't need to bother." Sometimes, he'd even leave the cafe during business hours to hang out, following an invitation from regulars. Around that time, with the passing of my in-laws one after another and the inheritance that came our way, it probably further fueled his tendency to laze around. But it wasn't just slacking off at work. Believing that household chores and child-rearing were women's duties, it was normal for him not to lift a finger even if our daughter cried, saying things like, "Change her diaper," or "Isn't it time for her baby food? Feed her." As a result, in his stead, I ended up leading a dizzyingly busy life, managing the cafe, household chores, and child-rearing all on my own. When our daughter reached elementary school, customers stopped spending money as freely. Prodded by our regulars, my husband finally started working again, but there was much to be desired in his work ethic after years of laziness. However, I couldn't just bluntly point it out. When I began to speak up, he, losing his motivation, used the cafe as leverage in our negotiations. Considering my in-laws' feelings, I had no choice but to give in. I swallowed the complaints I had about my husband, which were at the tip of my tongue, and decided to quietly support him to ensure the cafe's stability and sufficient revenue. As usual, he didn't help with housework or child-rearing, and his laziness hadn't gone away, but I told myself that supporting him was my role as a wife and worked desperately. Now, 40 years into our marriage, the cafe has survived numerous recessions and is still going strong. Our daughter, who helped out as the face of the cafe, has married a wonderful man, moved out, and is now the proud mother of a boy. Conversations with my husband have become less frequent, and we each have more time to ourselves, but that's not unusual for couples our age. I even think we get along better than other mature couples since we share meals and a bed. Despite the ups and downs, I take pride in how we've run the cafe and raised our daughter together. The only thing left was the matter of a successor. One day, when it started raining in the evening. "What should we do? I didn't expect it to rain and I don't have an umbrella. Do you have one?" "No, I don't have one either. Even though it's close, getting drenched at this time of year could lead to a cold. I don't want to risk that at my age." As I sighed, my husband tossed me the keys to the bicycle that was parked at the cafe. "Get home before it gets worse. You can make it back before the rain gets too heavy on the bike. I'm going out to drink with the usual guys anyway, I'll lock up." With that, he urged me to go home. Taking his word for it, I left the cafe first to start preparing dinner. About an hour later, as I was about to take a break, I realized I had left my smartphone at the cafe. My husband had said he was going out with friends for drinks, and being without my smartphone for even a night was troubling, as it was my means of contact in case of an emergency. Rushing back to the cafe to retrieve it, I was startled to see two figures moving in the darkness of the closed cafe. Thieves, perhaps? As I debated calling the police, my hand accidentally turned on the light. The sight before me nearly made my knees buckle. There stood my husband, with an unfamiliar woman embraced in his arms. "Why are you here?" Overcome by his flustered demeanor and the unmistakable atmosphere, I fled the scene. Panicked by my husband's act of betrayal, I didn't notice the flashing signal in front of me. In the next moment, car headlights blinded me, and I felt a sharp pain as I was struck, spinning around before losing consciousness. When I came to, I was in a hospital bed, with my disheveled daughter looking over me worriedly. "Thank goodness. Please come. My mother has woken up." Piecing together the doctor and my daughter's story, it seems I had been hit by a car and had not woken up for 3 days. I hadn't had any ID on me, but fortunately, a regular customer who witnessed the accident was able to contact my husband. My daughter, having received the call from my husband, explained the situation to her son and husband and came to me that very day. A few days after regaining consciousness, with my family gathered in the doctor's office, I was confronted with a reality too hard to accept. I had suffered spinal cord damage due to the accident. I would never walk again, nor could I go to the bathroom on my own. I would need constant care and a wheelchair for mobility. The doctor's words left me speechless, and my husband and daughter seemed unable to hide their shock. However, I was not so weak as to despair over this. My daughter visited me every day, providing support both emotionally and physically. Thanks to her, I endured the treatments and started to adapt to life in a wheelchair. As I began to find mental space, I remembered the dreadful memories of the accident. Who was that woman? What was she doing in the dark? My daughter had brought my smartphone, which she had found and brought to me, but attempts to contact that woman went unanswered. As I pondered how to confront her the next time we met, my phone rang. It was a message from my husband. He said he wanted to talk. Was it an apology or an excuse? Deciding it was time to settle things, we agreed to have a discussion. The next day, my husband visited my hospital room. Since being informed about the wheelchair, he hadn't shown his face even once. The first words he uttered upon entering were not of concern or care but, "A private room, huh? Pretty luxurious." I suppressed my irritation at his insensitivity and quietly said, "I took advantage of the offender's offer. In addition to compensation for damages, they're covering all medical expenses and more." "Oh, played your cards right, huh? Then you must have gotten a hefty sum." "What's with that tone? Don't talk about me as if I'm some sort of scam artist." I raised my voice involuntarily at his lack of sensitivity, and he responded with a smirk. "Don't get so mad. It's true a lot of money came in, right? Makes it easier to bring up what I've been wanting to say." "What?" I was speechless as he took out a small, folded piece of paper from his pocket. "Sorry to spring this on you, but I want a divorce." It was a divorce paper. "What? Excuse me?" I did a double take. His actions were beyond anything I had anticipated, and I couldn't keep up. "Isn't it clear? I told you I had something to discuss." "Are you serious?" "Yes. I've been fed up for a long time. I can manage the cafe just fine on my own, but you always had to butt in and nag, which was unbearable." "But that cafe was passed down from your parents to me. It's important to me." "That's where you're wrong. That cafe is mine. Even when I wanted to sell it because I was fed up with your nagging, you begged me on your knees not to sell." "Well, at that time jobs were hard to come by. We didn't have any qualifications. If we gave up the job, it would have been a burden on our daughter, that much was clear. I've thought it was strange since then. The cafe was handed down to me, yet because of having a family, I couldn't even exercise my rights freely." His shouting made me flinch. Blaming the family? I was dumbfounded by my husband, who treated us as if we were nuisances after all these years of supporting each other. He continued to vent as if releasing everything he had held back. "Even at home, you'd frown and fuss over the accounts. And using being busy as an excuse, even the housework was half-hearted, wasn't it? We were both working, and someone had to handle the accounts. It's not just that. It's ridiculous to have to check in with each other about everything, even when not doing anything, as if we were children." As my husband listed his complaints, the trust one had built up for him over the years crumbled, and anger welled up inside me. Was he planning to gloss over his own betrayal? After what he did, I couldn't let him have the last word. "Staying in touch is common sense when you live together. Besides, you say you were just out playing, but was that really the case?" I pressed on as he struggled to find words. "That night, you were embracing a woman in the dark cafe. If I hadn't seen that, I wouldn't have had the accident. Are you planning to be with that woman after we divorce?" I glared and questioned him. Far from being taken aback, My husband responded without a hint of guilt. Are you blaming me? I don't know what you're misunderstanding, but my relationship with her is not like that. Do you have any proof anyway? There was no proof. Knowing this, he smirked triumphantly, and I bit my lip. That ugly smirk erased the last bit of affection I had for him. That's terrible. Even after what happened to me, you feel nothing. Your ending up in a wheelchair is your own fault due to your carelessness. I don't want to deal with caregiving. Let's get a divorce. I have no intention of cleaning up after you. Dad. There are things you shouldn't say. We both turned towards the door at the same time. There stood my daughter, trembling with anger. How long have you been there? It seemed like a serious moment between you two, and I thought I shouldn't interfere in a marital issue, but I can't stand it anymore. I've heard everything. Mom ended up like this because of Dad's affair, didn't she? My daughter's furious outburst was met with a dismissive snort from my husband. If you're so concerned, then you can look after her. I have no desire to spend my life caring for someone. I'm out. You're the worst. Say whatever you want. You're not a child anymore. You somewhat understand the dynamics between men and women, right? My daughter bit her lip. Her eyes filled with anger. Thanks to my daughter's anger, I felt myself cooling down. As I stared at the divorce papers, I asked my husband, "What was everything I've done up to now? I thought I had been doing my best to support you, but are you ready to discard me now that I'm no longer useful? It's that sanctimonious attitude that's infuriating. Your hospitalization reminded me of the freedom I once had. After tasting that life, there's no way I can go back to how things were. This is a good opportunity. Let's both be free." Fed up with my husband's statement about my accident being a good opportunity, I decided to agree to the divorce. I didn't want to be with this man any longer, but I wanted to take what I could get. When I brought up the division of assets, he visibly became irritated, but we agreed that I would receive all the compensation from the accident, and in exchange for not touching the house, cafe, or any household items, I would receive 60% of our savings. Let's just get this over with. I'll withdraw your share now, so sign the divorce papers in the meantime. After saying that unilaterally, my husband hurried out of the hospital room. In the quiet of the now silent room, I said to my daughter, "I'm sorry you had to hear all that unpleasantness. Don't worry about it. I'm on your side, Mom. But are you sure? With such terms? It's fine. I hate to ask you suddenly, but could you go to my parents' house and pack up my personal belongings? Do you know where everything is? Of course. I've been helping with cleaning and organizing every time I go back home. I also know where the valuables are kept, just in case. Leave it to me." After seeing my daughter off as she left the room, I faced the divorce papers. I wasn't going to let things end on his terms. Though I was determined, I suddenly realized the harsh reality that awaited my husband. Then, in front of him, I signed the divorce papers. He smirked with satisfaction and quickly snatched the paper. "Okay. Now we're strangers to each other." Seeing my husband genuinely pleased, I quietly told him, "Sorry to rain on your parade, but you're probably going to regret this." "No way. If anyone's going to regret it, it's you. No one wants to deal with a wheelchair-bound old lady. Without being able to do anything, you might even end up senile. But don't contact me. We're strangers now. Take care of yourself." After he left triumphantly, I received a message from my daughter that she had finished packing. Decluttering as part of my life's downsizing had paid off, and she finished in a short time. She even sent photos of the contents for confirmation. The box with the valuables was properly included. With this, I didn't need anything else. As I sent a thank you message to my daughter, a friend who is also a regular at the cafe sent a message saying she was coming to visit. Perfect timing. Let's add some flowers to the thorny path he has chosen. The visitor, known in the neighborhood for loving gossip, chattered away even though I hadn't asked. According to her, my husband had been bragging about a winning horse race bet. Apparently, right after our divorce was finalized, he was seen in a town with a woman. Judging by the description, it was likely the same woman I had seen that night. To hear he hasn't opened the cafe since my accident was astounding. I was shocked when I ran into your daughter and heard what had happened. What in the world went wrong? As she looked at me with a mix of curiosity and concern, I tearfully explained the circumstances leading to the divorce. By the end of my story, her eyes were filled with both sympathy and anger. She squeezed my hand, left me with words of strong support, and left the room. Once she was completely out of sight, I gently lifted the pillow and smirked to myself. It was a good thing I had a chance to use the eye drops. Now, what will happen next? About a month after the accident, I was discharged from the hospital. A few months later, having gotten quite used to life in a wheelchair, I went out to a large shopping mall. It was a weekday, so the food court was empty. As I settled into a seat, someone called out to me. "Hey, Evelyn?" I turned around to find my ex-husband, who had aged significantly in just a few months. His hair was peppered with white, and he wore a wrinkled shirt and chinos, looking every bit the part of a disheveled old man. He could barely manage day-to-day life with that appearance. In contrast, I had gotten a short haircut soon after being discharged from the hospital, making myself look neat, and I even put on makeup today. I might say this myself, but I probably look younger than my actual age. You've really changed your vibe. When I was married to you, I hardly had any time for myself between housework and the job. I retorted, to which my ex-husband responded with a forced smile. So, you must be bored out of your mind now, huh? Before you go senile, how about helping out with some work? I knew it. What? The cafe isn't doing well, is it? My words made his fake smile freeze. It seemed I had hit the nail on the head. I knew it. After all, I was the one actually running the kitchen, the front of house, and the finesse. My husband, who had spent his time playing instead of working, had seen a significant drop in his skills once he returned. He couldn't remember the cooking steps, the prioritization of tasks was all over the place. And even operating the cash register became a chore. That's why I ended up working ahead of him under the guise of support. Cooking, serving, preparing snacks, mixing seasonings, cleaning dishes, ordering pastries, tea leaves, coffee beans, managing inventory, and even handling tax filings. I took care of all that. It's no surprise things wouldn't go smoothly without me. Did you enjoy your trip? Why not ask her for help? That woman? I don't know her anymore. When I asked her to help out with the shop, she ran away. He half angrily said, but his partner was a nightlife worker. Only my ex-husband had been serious. It was just a service for a well-tipped customer to her. Ironically, it was just a fling, as he himself had once admitted. He continued bitterly. For some reason, the regular ladies stopped coming. They used to sit in my cafe for ages, and now I don't understand why they've stopped. Of course. You've turned the regulars against you. What? He seemed to dislike the chatty ladies for staying too long, but those women, who stayed and spent money, were our cafe's valued customers. It seems my friend who visited had spread the word about my ex-husband's betrayal. They were also my friends. You think they'd keep coming as usual after their friend was wronged by her husband and ended up in an accident? A cafe run by a husband who cheated and dumped his wife is bound to be shunned. That he couldn't understand this was astounding. I sighed in frustration. We're short-staffed and have been running at a loss. At this rate, the cafe will go under. Well, I'm a stranger now. It has nothing to do with me. As I was about to leave, my ex-husband grabbed my wheelchair. Wait a minute. You must have done something. Otherwise, everything wouldn't have started going downhill all of a sudden. Caught off guard by his desperate attempt to stop me, it was then that my daughter intervened. Dad? What are you doing? Turning towards the voice, I saw my daughter, looking puzzled. Sophia! My ex-husband quickly let go of the wheelchair. Trying to close the distance with a forced smile, he started speaking as if nothing had happened. I hate to spring this on you, but could you consider moving in with me? What? We're short-staffed at the cafe, and I can't keep up with the housework either. If you, Evelyn, the former star of our cafe, could fill the gap you left, it would solve a lot of problems. If you agree, I'd let your whole family live in our family home. There's plenty of room, no need to worry. You wouldn't have to pay rent, and eventually, I'd even hand over the cafe to you guys. How about it? It's a good deal, right? Dad. My daughter smiled before firmly declining. You've got to be kidding. What? You pushed all your work, house chores, and even your care onto Mom, and did nothing yourself. Now you're trying to play the father card and dump your responsibilities on me? That's too selfish. My ex-husband was speechless at her harsh words. Without skipping a beat, she continued. Forgot your own actions while Mom was hospitalized? After doing such things, you have the nerve to ask this. Think I'd live with a man who recklessly abandoned his wife of 40 years who supported him desperately? Honestly, I'd rather sever this father-daughter relationship than accept any amount of money from you. My ex-husband looked utterly shocked, not expecting such a vehement refusal. Back then, I was out of my mind. Well, realizing that is a slight improvement. But living together is out of the question. Why not? Because we're already living with Mom. What? Yes, after I was discharged from the hospital, my daughter took me to her home. Her whole family had suggested we live together, and I gratefully accepted their offer. So, even more reason to stay with me. You won't need to bother with caregiving. Sorry to disappoint. We're not enduring our living situation, we chose it. Huh? What can she do? She's just a burden. Forgot what the doctor said? My lower body might be impaired, but my upper body is fine. Since moving in, I've taken over cooking duties. Oh! It seemed my ex finally remembered. Caregiving isn't as demanding as you think. It's mostly helping me in and out of the bathroom or car. Plus, with both parents working and only managing to feed our son, having Mom cook 3 meals a day, complete with delicious coffee, has kept our family healthy. After 40 years in the food industry, her cooking is unbeatable. Her cafe snacks were always a hit, remember? Seeing my daughter's radiant smile, my ex-husband remained frozen in shock. I exchanged a glance with my daughter and began to leave. Suddenly, my ex-husband started crying out. I was wrong. Without you, I realized how crucial our daily life and the cafe were. Please, remarry me. I sighed deeply. My mind was made up. Absolutely not. I firmly decline. As I said this, wait. Please wait. My ex reached out desperately. Quickly, my daughter maneuvered the wheelchair away from him. Shortly after, security arrived, prompted by someone, and my ex-husband was escorted away as he began to cause a scene for being refused. Wanting to avoid further entanglement, we left the mall to dine elsewhere. After the confrontation, I felt surprisingly at peace. 6 months later, I learned through friends that the cafe had closed. My ex-husband had sold the house and tried to multiply that money through horse racing, but suffered great losses. Now, he lives in an older public housing, scraping by on his pension. As for me, I use my free time to run a cooking class, charging only for ingredients. The only cost required is for the ingredients. Any kitchen-equipped place works. The most involvement I have is with elementary schools, where I engage in activities that also serve as community exchange events. Some schools have even started cooking clubs with me as a guest instructor due to the current retro cafe boom. The classic cafe menus from yesteryears are incredibly popular. Despite the unexpected accident that cost me the use of my legs, it has led me to an unimaginably happy retirement. It feels like I'm reclaiming 40 years of myself, and I'm looking forward to living the rest of my life exactly as I please.